We're back with Amanda Lindhout, humanitarian survivor extraordinaire. I mean, 460 days. 460 days captured by terrorists, teenage terrorists, the uncertainty of it all, the insanity of it all, the physical abuse, the mental abuse. When you reflect, what was it in you that got you through that?
That's a good question. But I don't think that it was something unique that is inside of me. I think that what I discovered is the human spirit that is inside of us is incredibly strong and has an enormous capacity to survive. And you really only know that when you're really tested, like I was.
Yes.
So I had this opportunity to see what I was made of.
It was interesting to me when you were raped over and over again. You didn't tell Nigel at first. Why?
There was nothing he could do to stop it or to protect me, and he was already suffering himself. We both were, and I just didn't want to. I didn't want to add that to his suffering, and also maybe I just didn't want to give voice to what was happening to me for fear that that would break me down. So I tried for as long as I could to deal with it on my own.
In the meantime, Canadian intelligence and your parents and Nigel's family all trying to get you out, but nobody had $1.5 million. That was the original ransom, right?
Yeah, that's right. The Canadian government has a strict policy against paying ransoms, which is a good policy to have, but my family was not sitting on that kind of money. Nigel's family had more money than my family had, but still didn't have the $1.5 million needed to get us out. And when I knew that there had been a ransom demand made, I knew that it wasn't going to be over quickly.
And the first time, and I think this was the first time, where one of the captors had a serrated knife at your throat and said, "I'll behead you. Here's your mother. Tell her that."
Yeah, that was one of the worst days of my life. That happened in the middle of the night. They drove me alone out into the desert and had me kneel underneath an acacia tree and held that big knife to my throat and told me that was it. And then there was a phone call to my mother to see how much money she really had and to give her the opportunity to pay $1 million. It was $1 million at that point. It had come down slightly in a week, in 1 week, or they were going to kill me.
And what was going on at her house?
Well, unbeknownst to me at the time, there was a whole operation happening back in Alberta where my mother was living. The government had funded an operations center. They couldn't pay the ransom, but the government did what they could within the confines of Canadian law to support my family and to do what they could to bring me home. So they were guiding my mother, who was acting as the primary negotiator. My mother was receiving phone calls from the kidnapper's communication guy, sometimes daily, negotiating down that $1.5 million to what it ultimately was in the end, which was just over $600,000.
In the end?
In the end.
And you kept telling your captors, we don't have that kind of money, the Canadian government won't pay.
We do not have that kind of money. My father had, for years, been living on disability checks. My mother, at the time I was abducted, was working as a cashier at a bakery, making a little more than minimum wage. So the $1.5 million they were asking for initially was like asking for the moon.
When did escape first enter your mind? Probably the day you were captured,
on the very day.
When did you decide we have to do this?
Well, Nigel and I started getting very desperate around the 5-month mark. We had been separated already at that point, but we had devised ways that we could secretly communicate with each other. When we
rolled up notes, what?
Yeah, whispering to each other in the hallways, whispering to each other out windows that faced out in the same direction. We could communicate like that. We describe it in some detail in the book. But what changed at the 5-month mark that prompted us to run was that the 3 Somalis who had been kidnapped with us, there was 5 of us kidnapped on the day that we were abducted. Now those 3 were always kept separate from us. They told us that they had killed them. And that was what motivated us to plan and then execute an escape out a bathroom window. We used a pair of nail clippers to carve out the mortar between some bricks that were in the front of this bathroom window until we were able to leap out a hole that was about the size of a basketball to our freedom.
And who went out the hole first?
I went out the hole first. I needed Nigel's help to get up onto this window ledge, which was about 10 feet off of the wall. And as soon as I dropped down, I knew that it was bad. It didn't look anything like I had imagined it to. And Nigel followed, and we hit the ground running.
And you had no idea where to go, obviously.
We did have a plan. We knew that there was a mosque nearby. We could hear the call to prayer, so we knew it was fairly close. And because we had done this conversion to Islam as a survival strategy, we hoped that we would find some help inside the mosque.
And?
Of course, we had drawn some attention from the moment that we jumped out this window and started running to the mosque, and so it didn't take our captors long to figure out where we were and to track us right into the mosque. And as we ran in with them in hot pursuit behind us, there were about 200 Somali village men inside that mosque who were, you can imagine the shock when two white people come running in with gunmen right behind them, and it was a scene of absolute chaos.
And one woman in that mosque attempted to help you.
Yeah, the only woman other than myself in the mosque. The first woman I had seen in 5 months since the day that I had been abducted. And this woman embraced me and begged my kidnappers to let me go.
When they recaptured you and took you back, was the abuse worse?
Yeah, everything that followed that failed escape attempt was punishment. It was the aftermath of that. Nigel and I were really separated then. There was no secret communications for those months immediately following that failed escape attempt. And so I was really alone, locked up in the dark with chains around my ankles. And survival, that's when survival became not about getting through the day. That's when survival became for me about getting through every single minute.
And did you think suicide?
Surprisingly, suicide was not a thought that I had regularly. That's not to say that it didn't cross my mind, and there was at one point in captivity where I very seriously considered it and felt like I'd made a decision about it, actually, which I detail also in the book. But I so wanted to live, to come home, to see my family again, to see my country again, to be part of the world again. And I hung on to that so tightly. And that is what got me through. That was my house in the sky.
Yes, your house in the sky, your family, your friends. There must have been times when you thought, this cannot be happening to me.
I was in total shock at what my life had become. I was 26 years old, locked up in chains in a dark room, starving, always waiting for the sound of the footsteps. I couldn't believe that this life was mine. As a woman in my 20s, I was naive, I was maybe selfish, but I wasn't a bad person. I couldn't understand how this fate had befallen me, how this could be my life.
Why me? Why now?
Yeah.
Why here? And in spite of the pain, like everything hurt, you say in the book, your teeth, your body, the fear, just the daily fear of, are you going to kill me today? Are you going to truss me up? Are you going to stomp on me? Are you going to throw food at me? And the food alone, I mean, you were malnourished, obviously, but tuna fish and...
Tuna fish was during the better days. Tuna fish was during the days when there was actually money in the house to buy food. So I ate a lot of tuna fish in those early days. They would bring a tin of tuna fish, and that would be a meal. But tuna fish would have been a luxury I would have given my arm for later.
Yes, and greasy spaghetti and weird food, but not enough. So you're starving, you're hurt, you're being abused. It sounds like a really bad movie.
Yeah,
like a made up.
Yeah, it felt.
I know it's reality, but really. Let's take a break. Amanda Lindhout, our guest, A House in the Sky, her memoir.